The people who smile while destroying your life rarely expect you to smile back. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe respect matters more than power, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Carter. The applause began before anyone realized they were witnessing an execution. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the executive auditorium of Brooks Global Holdings. Hundreds of employees filled the polished rows, dressed in tailored suits and bright expectations. Giant LED screens displayed the company's 15th anniversary logo, while soft orchestral music floated through the room. Everything had been designed to celebrate success. No one suspected the celebration had another purpose. Ethan Carter sat quietly in the front row, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked almost deliberately plain beside the luxury surrounding him. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. If anyone had glanced at him, they would have seen only the husband of the celebrated CEO. Nothing more. Across the stage, Vanessa Brooks stood confidently behind the podium. Elegant, composed, untouchable. Her black designer suit reflected the spotlight as flashes from photographers illuminated the room. She smiled with the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to admiration. Every executive nearby mirrored her smile, eager to remain close to power. "Today," she began, her voice smooth enough to silence the room, "is a day of new beginnings." Applause echoed. Vanessa waited for it to fade before continuing. "Our company has reached heights I once thought impossible. Growth requires difficult decisions. Leadership demands courage." Employees exchanged approving nods. Some even started clapping again. Then she turned toward Ethan. "And today, I have one more announcement." The room became perfectly still. "I am officially ending my marriage to Ethan Carter." Gasps rippled through the audience. Several cameras immediately swung toward Ethan. He didn't move. Vanessa's expression never changed. "Our personal relationship has become incompatible with the future of this company." She paused just long enough for the words to sink in. And effective immediately, Ethan Carter is no longer employed by Brooks Global Holdings. Silence. Then whispers. Confused faces slowly transformed into curiosity. Curiosity quickly became judgment. Some employees exchanged awkward smiles. Others lowered their eyes, pretending sympathy they did not truly feel. One senior manager leaned toward another and whispered loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. "I always wondered what he actually did around here." A few people laughed. Not loudly, just enough. The kind of laughter that hurts more because it tries to sound polite. Vanessa folded the divorce documents neatly before placing them beside a termination letter. "Security will assist Mr. Carter after the meeting." The sentence landed with surgical precision. Every eye turned toward Ethan. He slowly stood. No anger, no protest, no desperate plea. He buttoned his jacket with calm, almost routine movements. His face revealed nothing except quiet composure. The silence around him somehow became heavier than the laughter before it. Vanessa watched carefully. She expected disbelief. She expected humiliation, perhaps even tears. Instead, Ethan simply looked at her, not with hatred, not with resentment, only with a sadness so calm it became impossible to understand. For the briefest moment, Vanessa felt unexpectedly uncomfortable. The feeling disappeared as quickly as it came. This was her stage, her victory, her future. She refused to let doubt interrupt it. Near the side entrance, Ethan noticed his assistant, Naomi Reed. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't smiling. She stood perfectly still, clutching a leather portfolio against her chest. Their eyes met for only a second. She gave the smallest possible nod. Almost invisible, almost meaningless. But Ethan understood. Without saying a word, he returned the same subtle nod before beginning the slow walk toward the exit. Behind him, whispers continued growing louder. "Guess she finally got rid of him. He'll never recover from this." Imagine being divorced and fired on the same day. No one noticed that several members of the legal department had quietly entered through the rear doors. No one noticed the elderly man in a navy suit taking a seat beside the chairman's reserved section. No one noticed Naomi discreetly checking the time on her watch. The celebration continued. The smiles remained. Because everyone in the room believed the story had just ended. None of them realized it had only just begun. Sometimes the longest walk in your life is only a few hundred feet, but every pair of eyes along the way makes it feel like miles. The applause resumed almost as soon as Ethan Carter reached the center aisle. Not for him. For Vanessa Brooks. For the woman everyone believed had just proven that business always came before emotion. The massive LED screens behind the stage shifted from the company anniversary logo to a dazzling promotional video celebrating 15 years of record-breaking growth. Upbeat music filled the auditorium again, encouraging employees to move past the uncomfortable announcement as if it were nothing more than another item on the agenda. Human beings adapted quickly, especially when power told them to. Ethan walked without rushing. Each polished marble tile reflected the overhead lights beneath his shoes, creating the strange illusion that he was walking across still water. No one stopped him. No one offered a handshake. Several people deliberately looked away. Others stared openly. Whispers followed him like invisible footsteps. I heard she was carrying the company for years. He probably married into success. I always wondered why the CEO's husband had such a vague position. He'll disappear after today. Every sentence was spoken softly. Every sentence was meant to be heard. Ethan never slowed. His breathing remained steady. His shoulders never sagged. If humiliation had entered the room, it belonged more to the people speaking than to the man silently walking away. Near the marketing department sat Brandon Ellis, one of the company's youngest directors. Only 3 years earlier, Ethan had personally convinced the board to approve Brandon's leadership training after everyone else dismissed him as inexperienced. Brandon remembered every word of that meeting. He remembered Ethan defending him. He remembered Ethan refusing to take credit afterward. Now, when Ethan's eyes briefly met his, Brandon looked down at his notebook. He couldn't bear the weight of returning the man's gaze. Across the aisle, Chief Financial Officer Melissa Grant adjusted her glasses without saying a word. She watched Ethan carefully. Unlike most people in the room, she wasn't smiling. Something about this felt wrong. Not morally. Strategically. She had worked with powerful executives for over 20 years. Power usually reacted. It argued. It threatened. It negotiated. Ethan had done none of those things. That silence unsettled her more than any angry outburst ever could. Outside the auditorium, the hallway stretched beneath rows of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Rain clouds drifted slowly across the skyline. The city looked strangely quiet. Naomi Reed was already waiting there. She stood beside a simple oak bench, holding Ethan's leather briefcase. She handed it to him without speaking. He accepted it with a faint smile. "Thank you, Naomi. Always." That was all. One word. Yet something in her voice carried absolute certainty. She didn't sound like an assistant comforting a dismissed executive. She sounded like someone patiently waiting for a clock to strike the appointed hour. Security guards appeared at the far end of the corridor. Neither seemed comfortable. One of them cleared his throat before approaching. "Mr. Carter." His voice faltered. "We've been instructed to escort you out." Ethan nodded politely. "I understand." There was no sarcasm. No bitterness. The older guard hesitated. "I just wanted to say." He lowered his voice. "My daughter received one of your college scholarships 4 years ago." Ethan looked at him with genuine warmth. "I'm glad she did. She graduates next month." A brief silence settled between them. "Thank you." Ethan simply inclined his head, then continued walking. Neither guard realized they had unconsciously fallen a step behind him instead of leading him. Back inside the auditorium, Vanessa had already begun introducing the company's next 5-year expansion strategy. Charts filled the giant screens. Projected revenues, international acquisitions, artificial intelligence initiatives. Employees applauded enthusiastically. The atmosphere recovered quickly. Success had a remarkable ability to erase uncomfortable memories. Vanessa noticed the renewed excitement and smiled. Exactly as planned. She had expected temporary discomfort. Nothing more. The company was hers now. Completely. Or so she believed. Meanwhile, Melissa Grant quietly opened the secure financial dashboard on her tablet. A notification flashed across the screen. Priority access request pending. She frowned. The request carried a digital authorization level she had never seen activated before. Origin, founder's executive authority. Her fingers froze above the display. That account. It hadn't been used in over 15 years. According to every corporate record, the founder had stepped away long ago. So why? Why had the system suddenly awakened? Melissa glanced toward the auditorium doors just as Ethan disappeared around the corner with Naomi. For reasons she couldn't explain, a chill traveled slowly down her spine. Inside the conference hall, everyone continued celebrating. Outside, the man they believed had lost everything calmly walked into the ring. And somewhere deep inside Brooks Global Holdings, systems that had slept for over a decade quietly began coming back to life. The most dangerous secret in any empire is the one everyone assumes no longer exists. Rain tapped softly against the towering glass walls of Brooks Global Holdings as Ethan Carter stepped into the private executive parking garage. The city outside faded behind a curtain of gray, but beneath the building, everything remained strangely still. Naomi Reed walked half a step behind him, matching his calm pace without saying a word. She had worked beside Ethan for nearly 12 years, long enough to understand that silence was never empty, especially his. The polished concrete reflected the white overhead lights as they approached a black sedan parked in its usual space. Not the reserved CEO spot, a smaller space tucked discreetly beside an emergency exit. Most employees assumed Ethan had never cared about status. The truth was, he had never needed it. Naomi unlocked the rear passenger door before stopping. They're ready. Ethan looked toward the rain falling beyond the garage entrance. What time? Exactly as scheduled. He checked the silver watch on his wrist. 11:27. 3 more minutes. He nodded once. No delays. None. Legal. In position. The board. They've all arrived. The trustees. Naomi's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Waiting for your word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant sound of rainfall echoed through the empty structure. Then Ethan smiled. Not because revenge was near, but because the waiting was finally over. 15 years earlier, Brooks Global Holdings had existed only inside a cramped warehouse on Chicago's South Side. There had been no marble lobby, no international offices, no billion-dollar contracts, only folding tables, old computers, second-hand chairs, and impossible dreams. Ethan had founded the company at 28 with 3 close friends who believed talent mattered more than pedigree. He invested everything he owned, sold his apartment, mortgaged family property, worked 18-hour days. There were months when he paid employees first and skipped his own paycheck entirely. During those early years, Vanessa entered his life. Brilliant, ambitious, fearless. She wasn't part of the company's beginning, but she became part of Ethan's future. She challenged him, inspired him, made him believe they could build something even greater together. When investors began questioning whether a young founder possessed enough executive polish to lead a rapidly growing corporation, Ethan made a decision almost no entrepreneur would consider. He stepped back. Publicly, he appointed Vanessa as CEO. Officially, the media celebrated the move as visionary. Investors loved it. Stock values climbed. Employees believed leadership had naturally changed hands. Very few people knew the arrangement had one critical condition. Ownership never changed. Not once. Not ever. Every controlling share remained protected inside an irrevocable founder's trust established on the advice of Ethan's late father, a corporate attorney who had repeated one lesson throughout his life. Never confuse leadership with ownership. Ethan had smiled when signing those documents years ago. Not because he distrusted Vanessa. Quite the opposite. He trusted her so completely that legal protection seemed unnecessary. The trust remained untouched simply because no one had ever needed to touch it. Until today, Naomi opened her leather portfolio. Inside rested several sealed envelopes bearing the embossed crest of the founder's office. An office officially listed as inactive. She handed Ethan the top document. He read only the first line. Founder authority reactivation confirmed. Effective immediately. He quietly returned it. I hoped this day would never come. Naomi looked at him. I know. You remember what I told you when you accepted this job? She smiled faintly. You said my first responsibility was protecting the company, not protecting me. You've repeated it every year. Ethan looked toward the towering headquarters rising above them. Hundreds of lights glowed behind its windows. Inside, employees continued celebrating. Many of them had families because Brooks Global existed. Many had built careers they never imagined possible. They weren't his enemies. Most had simply followed whoever appeared strongest. Power attracted loyalty. Character revealed it. A black luxury SUV entered the garage. Then another. And another. The vehicles stopped with quiet precision. Men and women in dark business attire stepped out carrying briefcases instead of umbrellas. Corporate attorneys. Independent trustees. External auditors. No one spoke loudly. No one hurried. Each greeted Ethan with respectful nods. Not one addressed him as Mr. Carter. Every one of them used the same title. Good afternoon, founder. Upstairs, Vanessa Brooks stood beneath brilliant stage lights accepting another standing ovation. Down below, hidden beneath the building she believed she controlled, the people who held its deepest authority had already assembled. And for the first time in 15 years, the founder had returned. Power doesn't disappear in a single moment. It simply changes the room it chooses to stand in. The anniversary celebration was reaching its peak. On the massive stage, Vanessa Brooks stood before a wall of applause as images of global offices flashed across the towering screens behind her. Every achievement was met with louder cheers. Every ambitious promise was greeted with another standing ovation. She smiled with complete confidence. This company has never been stronger. The audience erupted once again. She believed every word. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, the atmosphere could not have been more different. There were no cameras, no music, no applause. Only the quiet hum of climate control and the faint ticking of an antique wall clock inside the founder's executive conference room, a room that had remained locked for more than a decade. Its polished walnut table reflected the soft glow of recessed lights. 12 leather chairs surrounded it. Every chair was occupied. Independent trustees, corporate attorneys, senior auditors, representatives of the founding trust. Each person had spent years protecting documents that almost no one inside Brooks Global even remembered existed. When Ethan Carter entered the room, everyone immediately stood. No announcement was needed. No introduction. Respect arrived before words. Good afternoon, founder. The greeting echoed softly through the room. Ethan acknowledged them with a quiet nod before taking the only chair that had remained empty. He didn't sit at the head of the table because it belonged to him. He sat there because it always had. Naomi closed the heavy oak doors behind them. The outside world disappeared. Lead attorney Richard Holloway carefully slid a thick leather binder across the table. Everything has been verified. Ethan opened the binder. The first page contained only a single sentence. Founder control trust, active and enforceable. Every signature remained valid. Every amendment remained intact. Every voting right remained exactly where it had been 15 years earlier. Richard adjusted his glasses. No legal challenges. No ownership transfers. No conflicting claims. The controlling authority has remained exclusively yours. Silence settled over the room. Not triumphant. Not dramatic. Simply undeniable. Ethan slowly closed the binder. I never wanted to use it. We know. The company was supposed to outgrow the need for these protections. Another trustee spoke. Instead, they protected the company from exactly this moment. No one disagreed. Naomi quietly placed a smaller folder beside Ethan. Inside rested a single printed sheet. A list of executive names. Board members. Division presidents. Senior vice presidents. Each one had supported Vanessa's decision without requesting a single legal review. Without questioning procedure. Without defending fairness. They had followed authority, not principle. Ethan studied the names for several silent seconds. He recognized everyone. Some had joined the company as interns. Some had attended his own family dinners years earlier. Some owed entire careers to opportunities he had personally created. His expression never changed. Richard finally asked the question everyone had been waiting to hear. Founder Carter, what are your instructions? The antique clock ticked once. Then again. Outside, rain continued falling over Chicago. Upstairs, champagne glasses clinked together as executives celebrated another successful quarter. Downstairs, history waited quietly for one sentence. Ethan rested both hands on the table. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. There will be no revenge. Several people exchanged brief glances. He continued, we're here to protect the company, not punish people, not settle personal scores. The company survives. The culture changes. Every person around the table listened without interrupting. Naomi already understood. This was never about anger. It never had been. Ethan looked once more at the list of names, then slowly pushed it toward Naomi. She looked down without touching it. His next words filled the room with absolute clarity. Fire every one of them. No raised voice. No clenched fist. No trace of hatred. Only certainty. Naomi picked up the folder. Effective immediately? Immediately. Richard turned another page inside the binder. The founder's emergency authority authorizes executive removal without prior board approval under Article 7. Another attorney nodded. The digital orders have already been prepared. The trustees began signing documents one after another. Pens moved quietly across heavy paper. Corporate seals pressed into fresh ink. Encrypted authorization codes were activated. Somewhere inside Brooks' global secure network, dozens of executive accounts instantly shifted from unrestricted access to temporary suspension. No alarms sounded. No one upstairs noticed. Yet the balance of power had already changed. Back inside the celebration hall, Vanessa lifted another champagne glass before hundreds of smiling employees. She believed she was leading the future. She had no idea that, beneath her feet, the future had already chosen someone else. And within minutes, the first doors would begin to close. An empire doesn't collapse when the first order is signed. It collapses when the first person realizes the order is real. The celebration was interrupted by a sound so ordinary that almost no one noticed it at first. A soft chime, then another, then dozens more. Across the anniversary auditorium, smartphones vibrated almost simultaneously. Executives glanced down with mild annoyance. Several frowned. Others ignored the notifications entirely, assuming they were routine calendar updates. Vanessa Brooks continued speaking beneath the bright stage lights. Our next phase of expansion will redefine this industry. Another wave of applause echoed through the room. Then Chief Operating Officer Daniel Foster quietly raised his phone. His smile disappeared. Across the front row, Chief Human Resources Officer Linda Marshall opened the same notification. Her face turned pale. One by one, members of the executive team stopped clapping. The message was brief. Executive access suspended. Await further instruction. At first, they assumed it was a technical malfunction. Daniel attempted to reopen the company's secure management system. Access denied. He tried again. The same result. Linda reached for her tablet. The executive dashboard refused her credentials. A cold silence slowly spread across the front rows. Vanessa noticed the sudden distraction. Is something wrong? No one answered immediately. Daniel stood. There appears to be a system issue. The audience laughed politely. Technology failed. It happened. Vanessa smiled confidently. I'm sure IT will resolve it within minutes. Then the main presentation screen flickered. Once. Twice. The anniversary logo vanished. The room fell silent. Instead of financial projections, a simple black screen appeared. White lettering slowly faded into view. Founder authority activated. Confused whispers spread instantly across the auditorium. Vanessa stared at the screen. Founder? That office hadn't existed for years. Had it? She turned toward the technical booth. Fix this. No one moved. Inside the control room, every system had already been overridden through executive authority protocols that none of the current technicians even knew existed. Downstairs, Ethan Carter quietly watched a secure monitor displaying the same live broadcast. He remained completely still. Beside him, Naomi received confirmation after confirmation on her tablet. Executive credentials revoked. Board emergency session initiated. Founder authority acknowledged. Each notification arrived with calm precision. No celebration, only procedure. Back upstairs, the auditorium doors slowly opened. Not dramatically, simply quietly. Richard Holloway entered first, followed by two senior trustees, external auditors, and members of the independent corporate legal team. Their dark suits contrasted sharply with the festive decorations surrounding them. No one applauded. No one spoke. They walked directly toward the stage. Vanessa stepped away from the podium. What is the meaning of this? Richard stopped several feet from her. His voice remained respectful. Mrs. Brooks, this meeting is now operating under founder authority. She frowned. There is no founder authority. There is. And it has just been reactivated. Laughter broke out somewhere near the middle rows. Someone actually clapped sarcastically. Vanessa almost smiled. This is ridiculous. I am the chief executive officer. Richard inclined his head. You are. For the moment. The room became noticeably quieter. Daniel attempted to interrupt. As chief operating officer, I object to Richard calmly handed him a sealed envelope. Daniel opened it. His face instantly lost all color. Inside was a single page bearing the company seal. Notice of immediate executive termination. He looked up in disbelief. This has to be fake. Richard said nothing. Another attorney handed identical envelopes to Linda, to the chief financial officer, to the executive vice presidents, to every senior officer seated in the front section. Envelope after envelope, one after another. The sound of paper being opened replaced every whisper inside the auditorium. Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. What is happening? Richard finally turned toward her. You believe today's meeting marked a new beginning. He paused. In that, you were correct. He presented one final envelope. Unlike the others, it carried a gold embossed seal. Founder Control Trust. Vanessa stared at it without touching the paper. For the first time that afternoon, her confidence hesitated. Far below the auditorium, Ethan stood beside the conference room window overlooking the rain-soaked city. Naomi approached quietly. They've received the notices. Ethan looked out over Chicago without turning around. No celebrations. No speeches. No humiliation. Naomi nodded. Understood. Because this had never been about making anyone suffer. It was about reminding an entire company that titles could be granted, but ownership could never be assumed. And above them, in a room filled with executives who had laughed only minutes earlier, no one was laughing anymore. The loudest sound in a room isn't applause. It's the silence after everyone realizes they were cheering for the wrong person. Vanessa Brooks slowly accepted the gold-embossed envelope. The paper felt unusually heavy in her hands. Around her, hundreds of employees watched in complete silence. Only minutes earlier, the room had been alive with laughter, music, and celebration. Now, even the air seemed unwilling to move. She broke the seal. Her confident smile remained for exactly 3 seconds. Then it disappeared. The first page contained only one paragraph. By the authority of the Founder Control Trust, all executive powers previously delegated to the office of the Chief Executive Officer are hereby suspended pending immediate governance review. Her eyes widened. She turned the page. Another document. Another signature. Then another. Independent trustees. External legal counsel. Corporate governance certification. Every page carried the same unmistakable conclusion. The authority she believed belonged to her had only been borrowed. She looked up sharply. This is impossible. Richard Holloway remained calm. No, Mrs. Brooks. It has simply remained invisible. Daniel Foster stepped forward, gripping his termination notice. This company belongs to its shareholders. Richard nodded. It does. And the controlling shareholder has exercised his legal rights. Who? Daniel demanded. Who? The question echoed through the auditorium. Every employee leaned forward. Every executive waited. Richard slowly turned toward the giant LED screen. The black background faded. Corporate records appeared one by one. Articles of incorporation, founding documents, original ownership certificates, historical board resolutions. Then, a photograph. 15 years old. A much younger Ethan Carter stood inside a nearly empty warehouse wearing rolled-up sleeves beside 3 folding tables and a handwritten company logo taped to the wall. There were no luxury offices, no investors, no cameras, only determination. The caption beneath the image contained 7 words. Founder and controlling owner, Ethan Carter. The room froze. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered against the marble floor. No one even turned to look. Vanessa stared at the photograph as if she had forgotten how to breathe. No, she whispered. No. Around the auditorium, confused whispers erupted. Founder? That can't be Ethan. He built the company? I thought Vanessa started everything. Melissa Grant slowly closed her eyes. Now she understood. Every strange financial protocol, every restricted authorization, every protected ownership structure. It had all pointed to one man. The man everyone had just watched being escorted out. Richard addressed the audience with measured clarity. 15 years ago, Mr. Ethan Carter voluntarily transferred executive management responsibilities. He did not transfer ownership. He never sold controlling interest. He never surrendered founder authority. He merely chose not to exercise it. The words landed like stones sinking into still water. One by one, faces changed. Brandon Ellis remembered the warehouse photographs hanging years ago in the old headquarters. He remembered Ethan quietly removing them during the company's rebranding. He had assumed it was modesty. Now he realized it had been humility. Across the room, employees began looking at one another with growing discomfort. They replayed the afternoon in their minds. The whispers, the laughter, the mocking smiles, the security escort. Every cruel moment suddenly looked very different. Vanessa's voice trembled for the first time. Where? She swallowed hard. Where's Ethan? Richard answered immediately. He is exactly where he has always been. The founder. At that precise moment, the auditorium doors opened once again. No dramatic music accompanied him. No security team announced his arrival. Ethan Carter simply walked into the room wearing the same charcoal gray suit he had worn when everyone believed he had lost everything. Naomi followed quietly behind him. Nothing about his appearance had changed. Only the way people looked at him. Rows of employees instinctively stepped aside. No one had been instructed to move. Respect simply made space. The silence became almost unbearable. Ethan walked slowly down the center aisle. The very same path he had taken less than an hour earlier. But this time, no one whispered. No one laughed. Many couldn't even lift their eyes. He reached the front of the auditorium and stopped several feet from Vanessa. She looked at him with disbelief, shame, and confusion, all fighting for space across her face. He looked back with neither anger nor triumph. Only quiet disappointment. Sometimes disappointment carries more weight than fury ever could. The room remained motionless, because everyone present finally understood a truth they should have recognized long before legal documents forced them to. The man they had treated like an ordinary employee had been the one who built every wall around them. And in that unbearable silence, the applause that had once celebrated power was replaced by something far more difficult to earn. Respect. Justice doesn't become powerful when someone falls. It becomes unforgettable when the one who wins refuses to become cruel. No one spoke. Hundreds of employees remained frozen in their seats as Ethan Carter stood at the front of the auditorium. The silence no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to reflection. Only an hour earlier, many of these same people had watched him leave through the center aisle without offering a single word of support. Now they couldn't even bring themselves to meet his eyes. Ethan slowly looked across the room. He recognized almost every face. People he had hired. People whose children he had congratulated at company picnics. People whose medical emergencies had quietly been covered by anonymous employee assistance funds that had, in truth, come from his own personal account. Very few of them had ever known. He had never wanted them to. He stepped toward the podium Vanessa had occupied moments before. The microphone amplified nothing but his calm breathing. I have only one question. His voice was steady. When did we stop seeing people? No one answered. We built this company because talent deserved opportunity, not because titles deserved worship. His gaze drifted across the executives standing with termination letters still trembling in their hands. When Brooks Global began, we had one rule. Respect every person who walks through the door. It didn't matter whether they cleaned the floors, served coffee, or signed contracts. Dignity was never supposed to depend on a job title. The words settled over the auditorium with painful clarity. Brandon Ellis slowly lowered his head. He remembered laughing. Not loudly, not openly, but he had laughed. That memory suddenly felt heavier than any termination notice. Melissa Grant quietly removed her executive identification badge and placed it on the nearest table. Not because anyone had asked, because she no longer felt worthy of wearing it. Vanessa remained motionless. Her hands still held the founder documents. I didn't know. Her voice barely escaped. I never knew. Ethan looked at her. No, you never asked. The sentence contained no anger, only truth. She searched his face for resentment. She found none. That somehow hurt even more. You could have told me. I could have. He nodded gently. But I wanted to know whether people would respect a man without needing his title. Another silence. Longer this time. More honest. Naomi stood quietly near the side of the stage, watching employees begin to understand that this day had never been about hidden ownership. It had always been about revealed character. Richard Holloway approached Ethan. The termination orders are ready for final execution. Ethan accepted the folder. He opened it. Hundreds of eyes followed every movement. This was the moment everyone expected. The moment of complete destruction. The moment revenge would finally arrive. Instead, Ethan closed the folder again. No. Richard looked surprised. No. The orders stand for those who abuse their authority. He glanced toward Daniel Foster and several senior executives whose decisions had repeatedly violated company ethics. But not for everyone. He turned toward Brandon. You made a terrible choice today. Brandon's voice broke. I know. You forgot where you came from. Tears filled Brandon's eyes. I did. Ethan nodded once. Then remember. The termination order bearing Brandon's name was quietly removed from the stack. One by one, Ethan reviewed the remaining files. Some stayed. Some were withdrawn. Every decision reflected actions. Not loyalty. Not friendship. Not humiliation. Justice. Vanessa watched him in complete disbelief. Even now? Even after everything? He refused to punish people simply because he possessed the power. She finally understood the difference between controlling a company and deserving to lead one. Ethan placed the remaining documents into Richard's hands. Proceed. Only the executives who had knowingly abused their positions would leave that day. The others would remain. Not because mistakes carried no consequences, but because integrity always leaves room for people willing to become better. As employees slowly stood from their seats, no applause followed. Applause suddenly felt too small. Instead, one after another, people quietly stepped aside to create a clear path through the center aisle. The same aisle where Ethan had walked alone only hours before. This time, he did not walk away in humiliation. He walked forward surrounded by something no legal document could ever command. The genuine respect of people who had finally learned that real authority is never measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many people become better after meeting you. The hardest apology to accept is the one that arrives after the truth has already done all the talking. 3 weeks later, Brooks Global Holdings felt like a different company. The marble lobby remained the same. The glass towers still reflected the Chicago skyline. Employees still hurried through revolving doors carrying coffee and laptops. Yet something invisible had changed. People greeted receptionists by name. Security guards were thanked instead of ignored. Junior assistants were invited into meetings instead of being asked to wait outside. No policy had ordered those changes. Conscience had. On the top floor, Ethan Carter stood inside the executive office that had once belonged to Vanessa. He hadn't changed a single piece of furniture. The oversized desk remained untouched. The awards still rested on their shelves. Only one thing had disappeared. The gold plaque bearing a title. Ethan had instructed facilities to remove it. When Naomi asked why, he simply smiled. The office matters. The title doesn't. Naomi smiled quietly. Some lessons never needed repeating. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Vanessa stood outside the open door. She looked nothing like the woman who had commanded the anniversary stage. No designer entourage followed her. No executive assistant carried her schedule. She held only a small envelope. May I come in? Ethan nodded. She stepped inside slowly. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The city stretched beyond the windows, wrapped in pale afternoon sunlight. Finally, Vanessa placed the envelope on his desk. I resigned. Ethan glanced at it, but didn't open it. I know. She managed a faint, tired smile. You always seem to know. No. I simply received the paperwork. That answer almost made her laugh. Almost. Instead, tears quietly gathered in her eyes. I've spent 3 weeks asking myself one question. She paused. When did I become someone who could humiliate the person who believed in me first? Ethan remained silent. Some questions deserved space before answers. I kept telling myself I was protecting the company. She shook her head. The truth is, I was protecting my pride. The confession hung gently between them. No defense. No excuses. Only honesty. She looked around the office. I thought leadership meant never appearing weak. You made weakness look like strength. Ethan said quietly. And kindness look like failure. She lowered her eyes. I did. For the first time since the anniversary, neither of them spoke as executives. Only as two people standing among the ruins of trust. Vanessa reached into her bag and removed another document. It wasn't legal. It wasn't financial. It was handwritten. I've written letters to every employee who watched what happened that day. They deserve an apology. I wanted them to hear it from me. Ethan looked at the pages. Not because he doubted her. Because he recognized how difficult sincere accountability could be. You don't need my permission. I know. She smiled sadly. I needed your forgiveness. The room fell silent again. Outside, sunlight reflected across the river below. After a long moment, Ethan finally spoke. Forgiveness isn't pretending something never happened. It's choosing not to let it decide who we become next. Vanessa closed her eyes. A single tear escaped despite every attempt to stop it. I'm sorry, Ethan. Not for losing power. Not for losing her position. But for losing sight of the man who had quietly carried both her dreams and the company's future for years. Ethan accepted the apology with a simple nod. He did not embrace her. He did not promise everything would return to the way it had been. Some bridges could be repaired. Others could only be honored for the years they once carried people. Safely across, Vanessa picked up her empty folder. Goodbye. As she reached the door, Ethan spoke one final time. I hope wherever you lead next, you remember every person in the room. She looked back. This time, there was no CEO, no founder, only two human beings who finally understood the cost of forgetting dignity. She nodded quietly before walking away. Naomi entered a few moments later. Was that the ending? Ethan looked toward the busy offices below, where employees from every department worked side by side. He watched a senior manager hold an elevator for a janitor. He watched an intern confidently present ideas to directors who actually listened. He smiled almost imperceptibly. No, he said softly. That was the beginning. Because companies are not rebuilt by replacing leaders. They are rebuilt when every person inside remembers that respect is not something earned after success. It is something offered long before anyone knows who is truly powerful. Years from now, people would forget the lawsuit that never happened, the promotion that disappeared, and even the divorce that made headlines. But they would never forget the day dignity walked back into the building. 1 year later, winter sunlight poured across the glass facade of Brooks Global Holdings, turning the skyscraper into a mirror against the Chicago skyline. Inside, the lobby felt warmer than it once had. Not because the architecture had changed, because the people had. A young receptionist welcomed every visitor with genuine confidence. Senior executives waited patiently in line beside interns. Maintenance staff exchanged easy conversations with department directors. No one hurried past without saying good morning. There was no written rule requiring it. The culture itself had become the policy. On the lobby wall hung a new bronze plaque. It did not list quarterly profits. It did not celebrate market value. It carried only a single sentence. Respect is the first investment every successful company must make. Employees passed it every morning. Most no longer noticed it, because after a year, they no longer needed to read it. They lived it. On the top floor, Ethan Carter stood by the same window where he had once watched rain fall over the city after losing everything in a single afternoon. Today, snow drifted quietly between the surrounding towers. Naomi entered carrying a thin folder. Annual employee survey. Ethan accepted it. The results. She smiled. Highest trust rating in company history. Lowest executive turnover. Record employee retention. And productivity? Naomi laughed softly. Apparently people work better when they don't spend their energy protecting themselves. Ethan closed the folder. I was hoping for that. He never asked about stock prices first. He asked about people. That had always been the difference. A quiet knock sounded at the open office door. Brandon Ellis stepped inside. No longer dressed like an untouchable executive, he carried himself with a humility that hadn't existed a year earlier. I wanted to thank you. Ethan looked up. For giving me another chance. You earned it. No. Brandon smiled. I earned the opportunity. The chance was your gift. Ethan nodded. Some lessons no longer required explanation. After Brandon left, Melissa Grant entered with several reports requiring approval. As chief financial officer, she now insisted that every quarterly meeting begin with employee welfare metrics before financial performance. Investors had questioned the change. Then profits reached record highs. No one questioned it anymore. Late that afternoon, Ethan left the building through the main entrance. There were no cameras waiting outside. No reporters. No celebration. Just ordinary employees finishing another workday. A janitor accidentally dropped a box of supplies near the revolving doors. Before anyone else could react, Ethan bent down and helped gather everything from the polished floor. Several employees instinctively hurried over to help as well. The janitor looked embarrassed. Ethan simply smiled. We all work here. Nothing more needed to be said. Across the street, Inside a small neighborhood cafe, Vanessa Brooks watched through the window. She had built a new career as a leadership consultant for nonprofit organizations. Far away from boardrooms, far away from prestige. She watched Ethan laugh quietly with employees who never seemed nervous around him anymore. She smiled to herself, not because she wished things had returned to the way they once were, because she finally understood why they never should. Sometimes losing power allows a person to discover character. Sometimes losing everything reveals what was truly valuable all along. Ethan never noticed she had been there. He didn't need to. Their story had already reached its proper ending. As evening settled over the city, office lights slowly illuminated floor after floor inside Brooks Global. From above, thousands of windows glowed together like a single living heartbeat. Not an empire built on fear, not a corporation ruled by ego, but a company strengthened by something quieter, something far more difficult to create: respect. And somewhere among those lights, new employees would someday hear the story of a founder who was publicly humiliated, quietly walked away, returned without hatred, and rebuilt an entire culture without seeking revenge. Some would believe it immediately. Others would think it sounded too extraordinary to be true. But every morning, when they looked at the bronze plaque in the lobby, they would remember. Because that day, the world didn't simply witness a man reclaim his company. It remembered what dignity looks like. And that silence became the greatest legacy Ethan Carter ever left behind.